Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all, albeit via Zoom, but hope you're enjoying your week and we'll get started now. I see there's been quite a few participants that have joined. So welcome to the first in a series of monthly webinars for managing and associate brokers, focusing on the updates to the Real Estate Council's regulatory guidance that will be introduced this spring. So I'm personally very excited to be sharing this with you in the new format of the guidance. It's a project that I've been working on for quite some time and the organization has been working on for over a year now. And I'm really, really excited about it. So I hope it comes across, and I'm loving that you guys are getting a sneak peek at this. But before we get started, I just wanted to give a few housekeeping notes. So today's webinar is scheduled for an hour. It may be briefer than that, so you might get some time back. We'll make sure to get through our agenda efficiently for you. Your microphones have been muted, not because we don't want to hear from you. There'll be an opportunity for that, but they'll stay muted during the course of the presentation. You are welcome to use the chat function to make comments, but if you have actual questions, please go ahead and use that Q&A function at the bottom of the screen and not the chat box. And we'll be addressing any of those questions that we might have at the end of the presentation, and we'll just answer as many as we can. We will be also asking you some questions using polls. Your responses will be anonymous, and we thank you for participating in those in advance. And finally, we will be recording today's session and posting it on our website. The next slide, please, Sandra. So I'll start by introducing our speakers today with myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Carmen Defoy. I'm a project manager in the education department here at RecBC. And I'll be giving you the background on the Regulatory Guidance Review Project, a project here at RecBC to review and revise the content of the current Professional Standards Manual and the Brokerage Standards Manual. I'll forewarn you that throughout the presentation, I probably will abbreviate those to PSM and BSM. So just so everybody knows what those are, that Professional Standards Manual and Brokerage Standards Manual. Also joining me today are Alex Longson, one of RecBC's professional standards advisors. Alex is going to be giving you an actual preview of the new guidance. It's not on our website yet, but he's going to walk you through those materials that we've developed and give you a sneak peek into the new approach we've taken to our guidance materials. As a reminder, RecBC's professional standards advisors offer confidential information services to real estate professionals and consumers. I'm sure you all know that. You probably have Alex's number on speed dial. He's always willing to give a hand where needed, as well as Bruce and Marty. So if there's a practice issue that you're unsure about and you want to know how to keep within compliance, please give them a call or send them an email, and they always can point you to the right regulatory information that you might need. And lastly, but not leastly, Tina Albrecht is our digital communications manager here at RecBC, and she's going to be talking to you today about the improvements to the search functionality of RecBC's online knowledge base to make our guidance more easily accessible. On to the next slide. So just a quick look at our agenda for today. Again, first we'll be talking about the project itself, then moving on to regulatory guidelines and information overview. Lastly, managing broker resources. And then at the end, we'll cap off with questions and answers. We have some prepared for you. And then, of course, we'll take any that you might have, as many as we can. On to the next. So the question, what is the Regulatory Guidance Review Project? So as I spoke a little bit about it, it was initiated and led by our education department. And it's a project that started at RecBC more than a year ago to review and update the content in the PSM and the BSM. And from that came a related project as well, which was an opportunity for us to go and look and review subject clauses that you previously likely recall were embedded in the PSM and BSM. So that's really kind of a very high level overview of the reason, not the reason, but what the project was all about. On to the next slide, please. So let's start at the beginning here and talk about the why. So we're taking a new approach to regulatory guidance as we stated, and I think it's important for you guys to understand why the PSM and BSM needed revising and our kind of thinking behind it. First and foremost, quite simply, it was time for an update. Real estate, as you know, and the regulation of real estate has changed immensely in the past few years. And the PSM actually had not been comprehensively reviewed since 2010. It's a long time not to comprehensively review something to make sure that you guys are getting what you need. So it was time to take stock and remove that out of date content and identify gaps where we needed new content. Our regulatory guidance also needed to align with our overall focus of using professional judgment. For those of you that have taken our continuing education classes this year and last, you know that that is a focus that we're really trying to hit home with real estate professionals. In some cases, the guidance in the professional standard manual was overly prescriptive and narrow. So it wasn't providing those tools that you needed to really exercise professional judgment. The second was going digital. The PSM was originally written as a print publication. So for those of you who have been around as long as me and longer, you know that you used to get your PSM delivered to your office and you would tangibly grab that book and flip where you needed to go. People are using the online platform now, and people read things differently on that online platform. So we really did realize that we needed shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs, more bullets and subheadings to make that information easier for you guys to scan, particularly if you're wanting to do it on the fly. Adding content to the PSM on a continuous basis, which is what we were doing, really was making it really long, really hard to navigate. And some sections even had, you'd have your subheadings there and it would be alphabetized. And we were starting to run out of letters in the alphabet. I mean, there was no more room. We needed to make it clearer and easier to read on the screen, faster to search for, and easy to use, more of a topic-based index so you could get to where you were wanting to go quickly. Tina's going to give you more details on how to navigate. I don't want to steal her thunder, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it. She certainly will be discussing that more and talking about the navigation and how this project's really going to improve that ability for you. And lastly, we needed new resources. RecBC and the Office of the Superintendent of Real Estate really have made it a priority to develop more focused resources for managing brokers. And new guidance materials included sections that these new materials really include sections that directly address the information and the needs of managing brokers. Back in 2018, 2019, RecBC and OSRI conducted focus groups with managing brokers. Some of you will probably remember that, around the province. And what we heard from managing brokers is that they really wanted more resources that focused on their needs and supported them in their roles as supervisors and trainers for the licensees at their brokerage. And that's really what this project was set out to do. On to the next slide, please. Reviewing and revising the regulatory guidance was a big undertaking. And I think it's important, just if I could take a moment to acknowledge all of those who were involved and provided feedback along the way. We limited this to one slide, but truthfully, I probably could have put 30 in the deck, but some that I would like to really acknowledge are the Office of the Superintendent, UBC, the Ministry of Finance, legal counsel, both internal and external, FinTrack, RecBC advisory group members, legal update instructors, and many more. To give you an idea of many more and what that encapsulates, we had consultants, we dealt with subject matter experts relating to specific topics. So things like the residential tenancy branch, the manufactured homes registry. We really drew on that expertise from various different organizations throughout the province and the country to ensure that we were getting the information that we needed to be able to provide to you. The next slide, please. So as we reviewed the content in the PSM and BSM, we really identified three main goals for this revised content and stuck to what we really wanted to make sure this project achieved. The first was that it was clear. Real estate professionals are busy people, as you know. You generally want the answers quickly, understandably, and we made it a priority to keep our new material as clear as possible for you, for the user. The subject matter is often really complex, and sometimes licensees are reading English as a second or even third language. So we really wanted to drive home the point and make sure that the guidance was clear, easy to read, and we had all of our writers really follow the principles of plain language. We have avoided really long sentences, complicated wording, jargon, so that when you look at it, you understand what you're reading quickly right off the top. Which moves on really to the next point of being concise. As we said, the PSM was often quite long, prescriptive, wordy, difficult to navigate. We included information often in the PSM that wasn't necessarily regulatory guidance. So we removed a lot of those examples and case studies that really muddied the waters and talked more in this project about best practice of advice for how you can meet your regulatory requirements. So again, very concise. You can very easily see what the regulator is telling you to do and suggesting in terms of business practices. Consistency, because the PSM was such a long document that had been added to over the years, you found a lot of information in the same place over and over again. So this new format really was set to make sure that the guidance had the same headings in the same order so that you can navigate that new guidance and those new materials much more easily and predictably. And you can get there way faster, essentially. I don't know if I always had difficulty trying to necessarily find that information that I needed quickly, and the consistency and the use of the conciseness really will help achieve that in the project. So I'm going to let you talk to, or I'm going to pass it over rather to Tina now to talk to you a little bit about our goals of making that information easier to find. And I'm going to stop again stealing her thunder. So I will pass it over to you, Tina.
Good morning, and thank you, Carmen. So a little later in today's webinar, can we move to the next slide? Thank you. Yeah, perfect, thanks. A little later in today's webinar, we're going to take a look at a video that will take us through how users will be able to use the knowledge base to find the new guidance materials that we've developed. So you might be wondering why we're going to share a video with you rather than do a live demo on the site. And what we're working on right now is called a staging environment. And so all of the updates that we're working on are in this staging environment. And this means that we are still in the process of building out all the features, updating language, terminology, and testing functionality. So today in our video, we're going to focus on a specific flow that's in our staging environment and that we've kind of developed to make sure that it's a whole flow that will work for you. But before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the feedback that we've heard about our website since it was introduced last year, and the work that we've been doing as part of this project to make the knowledge base on our website easier for you to use. So there's three key areas that we've been focusing our updates on, and that's improving searchability, filtering content, and developing an index. So we really have heard from a lot of you that when you go onto the knowledge base to look for content from the PSM in the BSM, it's frustrating. It's difficult to get to what you really want to see. And improving that searchability of information has been something that we've been working really hard on. One of the challenges that we've been grappling with is that the information in the PSM, like Carmen mentioned a little bit ago, it was written as a book form. So it wasn't designed for the way that we access information today. And that's in those shorter bite-sized pieces because we're reading on screens, we're reading on our cell phones. And so the content changes that Carmen talked about are really going to help to make sure that you can find that information and search. And when you do a search, that the results that come up are relevant and useful. So here's some of the changes that we've been making to the search functionality. So when you type in a keyword, a search result will show up with a few lines that show you some context to what that search term that you input really are. So that's really going to help you to see what the context to your keyword is, and is that the information that you're actually looking for. Our new search functionality is going to be able to pull related terms. So for example, if you're searching for the word advertising, It's also going to pull up results for advertisement and advertised, all those kind of synonyms that are similar but slightly different. Also, when you open a specific search result, so say you typed in that word advertising, you clicked on a result, it's going to highlight that keyword that you inputted on the page so that you can see exactly where that term is on the page. So again, that's all really helping you find that information that you're looking for faster. Filters is another area that we're working on improvements. So filters, we're going to add new filter options, and that's going to help you narrow down the number of results that you get when you do a particular search. So those filters help you to focus in on the subject or the search results that really are most meaningful for you. So if you type in the word, for example, remuneration, you're probably going to get a lot of different search results. But if you use the filter, for example, say you're looking for the form disclosure of expected remuneration, if you click on the filter for forms, that's going to narrow your search down to only show you forms that use that term remuneration. So this is all in the way of really helping you get to the content you want faster and providing information that's actually going to be useful to you. So one of the other requests that we've heard a lot from people is that an index would be really, really helpful. Some people like to browse content, some people like to search for content, and developing an index is helping those people who like to browse. So we're working on an index page that will index all of the regulatory guidance that we're putting in the knowledge base, and it will allow you to, at a glance, look through all of the different topics that exist and choose the one that's most appropriate for you. So again, this is really helping those people who like to browse for content. And next slide, please. So over the past months, many of you have reached out and shared your feedback and experience with using the new website, and we really do value that feedback that we've received. And we are hoping that we can work with some of you to get more feedback on the updates that we're currently making. So as we continue to develop and refine and add new features, we really would like to invite some of you to participate in additional user testing to really validate the updates and changes that we've been making. So testing is going to take place remotely. It will be about 45 minutes. And it will take place over the next couple of weeks. So if you are interested in participating in user testing, please send us an email at info@recbc.ca. If you could include some language like user testing in the subject line, that's going to help us narrow down those responses that we're getting from you. We will have limited capacity for user testing because each session is taking about 45 minutes. So we'll have to be choosing a select group. So if you are selected, we will respond to the email you send and follow up to schedule a time for you to complete testing with us. And I'm going to pass it back to Carmen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tina. So if I could just go to the next slide, please, Sandra. So I just want to really quickly kind of finish up with talking about the project goals. Our final real goal for the project was to clearly separate RecBC's guidance on the best practices to comply with regulatory standards from the information that explained those regulatory standards. So to be clear, we are replacing the PSM and the BSM with these two new types of regulatory, both guidance and information. You're probably asking what the difference is, so I'm going to explain it. Alex will go further into that, but regulatory information really explains the standards that are expected under the Real Estate Services Act, the rules, the regs, and other pertinent legislation that you might use in your everyday. The regulatory guidelines really give you the best practice guidance on how to comply with those standards. Again, I go back to the PSM before. Really, you would know what the requirements were. There wasn't so much the how, and that really is what the regulatory guidelines are really aiming to achieve. In a related project, I touched on this a little bit before, we're also reviewing and updating all the subject clauses that you recall would have been embedded right in your manuals. This will be launched later in the spring as well, with the regulatory guidance, and of course will be available on our website and on web forms. But the clause project, I'm also really excited about it. We always had an index of clauses, which you won't lose. We will still have an index, but we've pulled those clauses out of the written information, which really, again, aligns with that concise and clear and consistent messaging that we're going for. Sometimes clauses can be really complex. Some are really straightforward, but for the ones that are complex, there'll be kind of comments or things to consider for a licensee, for a real estate professional, when they're using these clauses. So I really love the idea of having pulled those clauses out, and we work with working with a different advisory group on the clause project, which has really been quite a lot of fun. So the first iteration is really to look at what we had and what we still need. I mean, we were finding that we had clauses in there that existed that have since been embedded into your standard contract of purchase and sale. So obviously we don't need those anymore. So this first iteration was looking at what was needed, what needed to be changed, what needed to be removed, and we'll probably focus a little bit more on what needs to be added later. But the first iteration of this clause project will be launched, as I say, in the spring along with the regulatory guidance. So really exciting times, both like really exciting project. We've enjoyed immensely working on it, and I really can't wait for you guys to see it. So I'm going to pass it over to Alex, who will talk more in detail, and we'll move on to a video so you can actually see what I've been blathering on about. Go for it, Alex.
Thanks very much, Carmen, and to Tina. Okay, so I just want to get here. Okay, so my job is to introduce the regulatory information and the regulatory guidelines to you. The splitting of the regulatory information and the regulatory guidelines, it allows for a better, clearer understanding of what's required and what is considered best practice. So let's just dive in and take a look at both of them. Next slide, please, Sandra. Thank you. So the regulatory information, I mean, it's set out. We have a clear purpose, and you see the 2 bullet points there. The first one is, it's a statement of plain language. It's a plain language interpretation of the various regulatory requirements, and forgive me now, I made my screen too small, established in legislation. And it includes the Real Estate Services Act, the regulation, the rules, and other applicable legislation. When we talk about other applicable legislation, that can be REDMA, the Residential Tenancy Act, PIPA, FINTRAC. So we're looking at all of the other regulatory legislation that applies to you as a real estate professional. And it explains to you how we interpret those statutory provisions. So the purpose also is to establish the regulatory guidelines, is to establish the principles or the practice guidelines that support brokerages and you in making those decisions. It's a representation the way that brokerages and real estate professionals can meet those regulatory requirements. And you can achieve compliance, then that prioritizes the consumer protection and the public interest, which is ultimately the goal of all of us. And it's written to assist you to comply with those regulatory requirements, just to make it simpler and easier to understand. You may find that the guidance is more high level than you're used to, and less detailed than what was in the PSM and the BSM, and that's on purpose. We want to create a clear and concise guidance that helps you, the real estate professional, to use your professional judgment in your everyday business. If you called the PSAs before, unfortunately, you probably heard us say, apply critical thinking, use your professional judgment. We want to put the onus onto you because you are the professionals and you know every single detail about the scenario that you're in. And it's difficult for us as PSAs and even the Real Estate Council, when we're writing this guidance, to understand every single or capture every single nuance of a particular situation. Just one slight change to the scenario might flip the information that we provide you as a PSA completely on its head. So we've moved away from those scenario-based situations and say, here's what you need to think about, and apply that critical thinking and professional judgment. This is also a new way of presenting the information, and for those of, probably not for those of you, because probably many of you have been in the industry for a long time, but some of your newer licensees who have just done the licensing courses, and certainly obviously the continuing education courses, it's the same feel and format that we're providing in the new guidelines and regulatory information as you're seeing in the continuing education courses. So just as a reminder, we can't anticipate every circumstance that you're going to be in. That's why we have to say you need to apply that professional judgment. Okay, so as I introduce the next slide, in fact, it's going to be the next 2 slides. I will identify that there are 6 key sections to the regulatory guidelines. 3 are shown on this slide and 3 are going to be shown on the next slide. And you'll see that there are the six topics. We've got the purpose, which will identify a brief statement. We've got the guidelines, and that will explain what you need to consider to achieve compliance with the regulatory requirements. And then we've also hived out a specific section just for you, the managing brokers, so that you know where to look. And it's in the same place on every single set of guidelines. Some guidelines may not actually have any information. They may be incredibly simple or very short guidelines, in which case we'll identify in the managing broker considerations at the bottom that there is no additional information. But you'll always find managing broker considerations at the bottom of the regulatory guidelines. And if we just scoot, there we go. So the applicable legislation, we will provide you links to any specific legislation that we're discussing in the regulatory guidelines, whether that's RISA, the regulations, the rules, our policy statements, the bylaws, Residential Tenancy Act, REDMA, etc., etc. So we'll provide you quick links to get to that specific legislation. We'll also identify for you in the guidelines the definitions that we're talking about. So you don't need to go back to the front of the rules or back to the front of the Real Estate Services Act to actually see exactly what was meant when we're talking about family partner, for just one that jumps to mind, or remuneration. They are defined terms. So we're putting them right into the regulatory guidelines so you can see them straight away. You don't need to try and hunt or find out what they mean. As we move forward, I mean, this is going to be very much evolving. We're also providing links to relevant cases, and this will be case law, maybe links to Real Estate Services Act, the contraventions that the Real Estate Council has investigated and disciplined on. We'll probably be providing links to those specific cases so you can see, okay, this is what the issue was. This is how it was decided. This is how it was interpreted. So you again, you don't need to hunt for any of that information to see how we dealt with those matters. So what we're going to do now, and Tina actually explained this a little bit before, we're going to be moving into a short video. As Tina said, it's on the staging site, so it's not the full. I can't change anything or take you to places that aren't shown on the video because of very much the staging, but we're just going to run a short video and let you take a look to see what it's going to look like.
As a real estate professional, understanding your regulatory requirements and the best practices for complying with those requirements is important so that you can ensure you're providing a high level of professional service to your clients, prioritize consumer protection and the public interest. The Real Estate Council of BC's regulatory guidelines and regulatory information gives you the information you need, accessible through our online professional knowledge base. In this video, we'll be reviewing how you can quickly search for and navigate to regulatory information and regulatory guidelines using the RECBC knowledge base. The RECBC website can be found at www.recbc.ca. Access the knowledge base by using the hamburger menu on the top left corner. Click on Professionals, then Knowledge Base. There are two ways to search for information in the RECBC website. You can do a general site search, or you can use the search box in the knowledge base page. As we'll see, using the search box in the knowledge base has several advantages. For instance, your search results will include only those resources that have been written specifically for real estate professionals. In this example, let's imagine that you need to find information about your duty of confidentiality and how it applies to your clients. On the knowledge base page, you enter the search term confidentiality. Your search results will be ordered with the most relevant results appearing first. You can use the filter on the right to narrow down your search results if needed. Let's take a look at the confidentiality regulatory information. Regulatory information pages contain plain language explanations of the requirements under the Real Estate Services Act, regulation, rules, and other applicable legislation. The content is organized in sections. You can go directly to the section you need using the Go To panel on the right. Throughout the content, you will find links to other related regulatory information, and you will also find related links at the bottom of the page. Here you'll find a link to the corresponding regulatory guideline, in this case, the Confidentiality Regulatory Guideline. Regulatory guidelines provide information on the practical application of the regulatory information. Written to assist you to comply with regulatory requirements, they provide practical guidance to support you in making decisions and achieving compliance. Similar to the regulatory information pages, regulatory guideline pages are organized in sections, and you can quickly navigate through the page using the Go To menu on the right. Every regulatory guideline has a section for managing brokers with specific information that supports managing brokers to fulfill their additional obligations under the Real Estate Services Act.
So okay, so I noticed there was a couple of comments in the chat to say my sound keeps fading. My mic is right here, so I'll try not to turn my head to move away from my mic. So anyway, what's not changing? We're not changing any of the rules or the legislation as part of this project. Everything is staying exactly the same. All we're doing is we're presenting it in an easier to read, easier to understand way, to find a better word. We, the professional standards advisors, we're still available to provide information and respond to any of your practice inquiries, and all of the relevant forms, checklists, case studies that are currently included in the PSM, and also in the appendices of the BSM, all of the examples, they'll still be available. With a caveat, there are some that we may be getting rid of if they haven't been used, if they're not relevant anymore, because again, that's part of the looking through the PSM and BSM to see what's still relevant. So I'm going to be moving on to some questions that oh, no, I'm not. I'm jumping ahead. So I'm going to explain the managing broker resources. So over the next few months, we're going to be sending you managing brokers updates, managing brokers and associates every 2 weeks with information about the regulatory guidelines, the regulatory information, and the clauses project. And we're going to be hosting webinars like this one each month. But while this has been an overview of the project, starting next month, we're going to be taking a deeper dive into some of the new material to ensure that everyone's comfortable with the change in the approach, and we'll be using the resources on our website because it'll be live by then. So do look for an invitation to the March webinar in next week's issue of the Broker's Brief. So Carmen mentioned to you at the start, we're going to ask you a question, and you'll see on the screen what the question is. And in a few seconds, you'll see a poll pop up on your screen, and it'll be up there for about 40 seconds. And we just want to make sure that you've got the resources you need to familiarize your people at your brokerage with the new resources. So this is your opportunity to let us know what's important to you. So you can click on the ones that you are most you feel most relevant to you, and in a short moment we will be showing you the results. Okay, so thank you for responding to that. We really appreciate it. It just gives us a little bit of guidance to know what is most important to you, what you're looking for most. And obviously, the fact sheets is the most important, followed by brief videos, hopefully like this one, frequently asked questions, and then PowerPoint presentations. And I think it's interesting that the PowerPoint presentations coming in last is probably a reflection of how everybody is absorbing media and information these days. So that's quite interesting. Okay, thank you. And we're now going to, so during our consultation with some of the stakeholders that Carmen identified earlier, and we've spoken to some managing brokers about this project, we already had some questions come to us. So what we've done is I think there's 8 questions that we've already pre-populated answers for. They have come from you and from other people involved in the project. So once we've answered those 8 questions, we can then start moving on to your questions, and our back end team are probably going to whittle away any questions that you may have put into the Q&A, where they've already been answered on the screen. So I'm just going to move across. Okay, so obviously the first one, will the PSM and the BSM still be available? Well, the short answer to that is no. The regulatory guidelines and the regulatory information is going to replace the PSM and the BSM. Once the new guidance is published, the manuals will no longer be available on the Real Estate Council website. Again, are there new regulatory requirements that have to be followed? And as explained earlier, there's no changes to the regulatory requirements. This was just a project to present the information that we already have in a better and cleaner and easier to read way to do it. It's just simply a new format of our guidance. Interesting. Will there be changes to the regulatory guidance when the Real Estate Council merges with BCFSA? Obviously, this is a merger that's going to be we've spoken about for some time. And I should explain the guidelines and the information that we're providing are going to be consistent with the approach to the regulatory guidance that you can expect from BCFSA following the integration later this year. And nothing's going to change. Will the downloadable forms and documents still be available? Yes. Yep. As Tina explained earlier, you can find the forms and the checklists and other articles by using the filter function, which will be on the right-hand side of the screen. And if you're looking for a form, you type in disclosure and then you just click on forms to filter only for disclosure forms. Checklists, same, and other articles. They'll all be linked from the appropriate regulatory guideline. We're just trying to make it easier for you to find the information that you need. It's almost like I knew what the next question was. Will it be easier for me to locate the information that I'm looking for? Yes, the whole purpose is to improve the search functionality of the council's knowledge base so that you can find the information you need quickly and easily. And that's quickly and easily on whatever platform you're using, whether that's a laptop, a PC, an iPhone, an iPad, any other kind of tablet. The information will be there and easy for you to read, and you'll be able to find it quickly. I am jumping ahead to the next question every single time. Will the new information be mobile friendly? Yes, absolutely. It's been developed to be able to be read on any kind of screen. Oh, I already saw a few chat comments in the chat function earlier. I have a printed copy of the 2011 PSM? Can I continue to use it? We can't stop you from using it. I know you'll be very attached to it. I was very attached to my PSM and BSM and licensee practice manual from way back when, 2006. But just be aware that it's a printed copy. So it's never been updated since 2011. If there was any information that we provided in 2011 that we subsequently changed when we went to the online version, you're still going to be referring to the old information. In the same way that when you maybe look through old reports from council, there may be information from a report from council from 2010 that's not necessarily quite where it should be. And maybe there's better guidance out there. And certainly in the regulatory guidance and regulatory information that we're providing now, you'll have the most up-to-date information on the requirements and the compliance standards. So as a recommendation, even though it's hard, I would say it's time to lose the paper copies of the PSM and the PSM and your old practice standards manual that you may have from 2006. Yeah, it's time to move on to the online versions. What should I do if I can't find the information that I'm looking for? Well, that's why the Real Estate Council provides professional standards advisors. The PSAs can provide that confidential information to real estate professionals. We also take the calls from the public as well, but it's confidential. If you want to call us and ask us a question, you can feel confident we're not going to be sharing that information with our colleagues in legal or in compliance or in audit. It's confidential just to you. Now, I'm going to say there are certain caveats. If you call and say there may be $50,000 missing from our trust account, we're probably going to be speaking to the audit department quite quickly. But we're going to be having that conversation with you as well, to sort of say this is the next steps you need to take. But for 99.999% of all of the calls, it's just between you and the PSAs. And if we can't answer the question that you have, we can certainly point you to where you can find the answer. There are going to be some times where the answer is outside of the scope of the Real Estate Council. Certainly, we get calls and questions and emails about REDMA, for example, and they fall under that falls under the jurisdiction of the Office of the Superintendent of Real Estate. So even though we can't specifically answer the question, we can point you to somewhere that you can get the information that you need. So I'm going to jump into some of the audience questions now. And Tina and Carmen, feel free to jump in at any point in time that you wish to, you have a comment. So the first one at the top, if something appears in the old PSM but not in the new version, should a broker use that as evidence that the regulator thinks this way? So if the PSM, this is an example, if a PSM currently says that a dead deal subject not removed cannot be revised via an addendum, but rather needs to be redone as a new contract, and the new guidance doesn't have that information, would that mean, or would you take that as an admission to mean that the regulator has changed or softened the stance? We're not. Oh, we got somebody. Somebody was on mic? No, for a second. I wasn't sure if somebody was going to jump in. Anyway, we're not going to be changing the information on this. It's just a better way of providing the information to you. So if our stance changes on something specifically, we will let you know. In regards to the question on dead contracts, I'm not going to dive into that further on today's topic, simply because the the discussion of today's topic is to just go through the new information rather than specifically discuss points of legal. Let's keep moving on my screen. Do you have any update on the council more clearly defining the role of managing brokers within the rules and regulations? The rules and regulations aren't changing. So any definition of the role of managing broker is going to be provided within the regulatory information and regulatory guidelines that we put out. Changes to rules and legislation, they typically take a very long time, and it's outside of the scope of the Real Estate Council to make those changes. So we would provide the practice guidance to you as a managing broker, but we wouldn't be changing the rules and regulations.
If I can, Alex, I'm gonna jump in just to address something for Derek too that might help. As Alex was talking about, there's various different sections of the regulatory guidelines, and one of those sections are managing broker considerations. So within the new format, you'll very clearly see what the obligations of the managing broker are related to the specific topic that you happen to be reading about. So I hope that helps, but I feel like it's much more clearly defined in the new format that way, and hopefully you'll think the same. But just to add in, sorry, Alex, just wanted to jump in.
No problem, no problem. I see a question from Peter in regards to why the new manuals shouldn't remain available. And I think that's the purpose of today's seminar, in fact, is to tell you why the manuals aren't going to be available in the future, or the manuals haven't been available since 2011, but why the PSM and the BSM are changing their format. So we're not using both because, as Carmen explained at the start of the presentation, the PSM and the BSM was just almost like a repository of articles rather than providing you specific guidance and information that you need. Question from Derek. In light of the move to have realtors use critical thinking and professional judgment, will this be taught in the licensing course? I'm not specifically aware. I think that terminology is being used in all of our education courses, but I'm not a party to exactly what's in the licensing courses. I'm sorry, I can't answer that question for you, Derek. Was it deliberate to make all of the information accessible to the public? Yeah, I mean, all of the information has always been accessible to the public, whether or not that's been certainly since 2000, I think 2013, when we moved to the electronic versions of the PSM and BSM. It's never been hidden. I mean, the Real Estate Council's role is to protect the interests of the public. So I don't think any regulator should or would hide the licensee's requirements from the public that they are serving. Will Rec BC stand by published interpretations? I honestly don't know. I mean, I would suggest yes. I can't speak about any specific instances in regards to your particular experiences between auditors and advisors. I will tell you, just as an aside, the professional standards advisors, we do talk with the auditors. We're quite happy to tell somebody when they email us or call us with a question that we can't answer. We'll call you back. We'll email you back, and we'll speak to audit to find out exactly what their situation is and how they would respond to the same way, to that in the same way, so that there's a consistent approach from all parts of the Real Estate Council. Oh, sorry. As questions disappear off the screen, it all reshuffles. hard copy of the Professional Standards Manual is very useful for training. The new version should be available. If you wanted to, you could still do a screen dump, but we haven't published a new manual since 2011, simply because as we add new information, the old manual becomes out of date. And as we've seen over the years, we've added to the online Professional Standards Manual, which is now a knowledge base, and the BSM over the years. So anyone that's looking at last week's version, it's now out of date and it doesn't have the new information. So that's one of the many reasons why we moved away from the hard copy back in 2013. And more of a comment from Stephen to use Google instead of the knowledge base search. I don't know if you mean ask Google on our regulatory information or use Google to search into our website. Okay, so if we seem to be getting some suggestions on the question and answer site now. So if I could just ask, just to make it easier for me, if you're asking a specific question, put that in the Q&A. If it's more a suggestion, please put it in the chat function, and then we can pass them out. Okay, Jackie, you made a comment. It's very difficult to find a clear structure of the PSM and BSM. Exactly, you're right. That's why the new knowledge base, new regulatory information, new regulatory guidance will have an index page, and you will be able to find the information you're looking for. Is there a full library of forms, given that web forms seems to be seriously lacking? The Real Estate Council only provides certain forms. Any questions about web forms, we really need to direct to your real estate board or the BCREA. A question from Ron. It's a bit outside of the scope of today's meeting to answer that one. Feel free to send that back through the info at recbc.ca, or more of a general comment on the overall operations of RecBC. And I don't think I've missed any questions. There was a question. Okay, Tina's just responding to Mike. Question from Peter: will all information be sourced? As in, will the source of the merit to recommendations be provided? I do apologize, Peter, I'm not entirely sure what you mean. Sorry, Peter. Just seeing if there's any more questions that I can answer today. Is it possible to have the PSM in a PDF format? Well, I mean, the fact that the PSM's moving away, disappearing quite shortly, it doesn't. I don't know what the merit of having a PDF format would be. Will there be a short video available on how to maneuver the new, to use the new website? I'm old school and still find it difficult to find information. I don't know if Tina wants to jump in on that one. Sorry, Tina, I'm looking at you on that one.
Sure. Yeah, we definitely can and are considering making more resources like videos similar to the one that we presented in the webinar to help users understand how to navigate through the information. And some of the things that we have been talking about is some more kind of in-depth tutorials that will help users learn how to use the filter system, and just kind of like general navigation tips. So that's something that is definitely an option for us to be considering and building out for you and licensees. Also, I'm just going to, Alex, jump in and answer the question that Mike sent. Mike, it sounds like you were using the current knowledge base to do a search. When we launch the new content that Carmen and Alex have been talking about, we will have a completely new system. So it should be a very different experience for you once everything is launched.
Thank you, Tina. I do see, and actually, if you want to just stay on, there's a question from Janet. Will we receive notification when a section on the knowledge base is revised in the future? Perhaps a weekly or monthly list or recap of changes?
Yeah, so I think that that would depend on the type of change that we're seeing. If it was a substantive change that was having some quite serious impacts, absolutely you are going to be seeing things like articles in Report from Council, or perhaps a particular e-blast out to all licensees, letting them know that the change is happening. If the change is a small update, like a tweak to a particular sentence, maybe we're fixing a link or something like that, you're not going to necessarily be receiving notification of that. Another thing that you will see in the published web pages is dates where a modification was made. So if there was a more substantial change made to the content, there would be a date indicating when it was first published and then when that update was made. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Another website question, actually, more of a suggestion from Sandra. When will the new website be published? I don't think we've got an absolute date, and it's actually the same website that we're using. It's just we're putting the new regulatory information and guidelines in place in the knowledge base instead of what's currently in there, which is the BSM and the PSM. So I don't think it's possible to have both lots of information in the knowledge base, but I see Tina's just popped back up again.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, keep an eye on the Broker's Brief newsletter that we have been sending out bi-weekly, because as we have more information to share, you'll find it in there. So when we're going to share those release dates, it's all going to come out in those newsletters to you.
Thank you, Tina. I do see we've still got a lot of comments in regards to a hard copy of the PSM, and I should remind you, it was 2013 that we went to full digital for the PSM and the BSM. So we're not going back to having a hard copy. That's not on the cards. I think I probably answered a few of the questions in that one. And I can't see any more, and I do apologize if I've missed any questions, but we're just out of time. It's actually 1 minute past 11. I wasn't keeping an eye on the clock. So I'm going to wrap up now. If you do still have questions that I haven't answered, do feel free to email them in the first instance to info@recbc.ca if they're specifically about this presentation. And certainly the communications team will answer any questions about the website. If it's related to any information I provided today, that can get forwarded to the advisors, and we'll be able to answer that question for you. So I thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. I didn't think we'd go the full hour, but we have. So I'm just going to wrap up very quickly and say thank you again. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the sunshine. I think it's going to last, but who knows? So thank you and goodbye.